Good morning. Today's Thursday, November 19th, 2020. We are here for a work session. As always, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Frank, can you please take the lead?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Frank. And I had put this on mute, and I don't know how it took off. Okay. Before we get started today, I have one announcement. With colder weather upon us, residents are spending more time indoors within confined spaces, and positive cases of COVID-19 are steadily increasing across our area. New York State Cluster Action Initiative has identified Riverhead as approaching micro-cluster status, red zone. Suffolk County officials are working with this office and the town in an effort to slow the uptick of positive cases. Testing is a critical part of containing the spread of virus. Tomorrow, the Riverhead School District will begin voluntary in-school COVID-19 testing for students and staff over a 2-week period, I was informed this morning. The goal of this initiative is to test those who are not exhibiting signs or symptoms of COVID-19. I am urging all residents to be tested for COVID-19. A complete list of testing sites can be found and obtained from the Riverhead Town website. A simple way to remember the rules for COVID-19 in your everyday lives is to follow what we are now calling the 3 W's. And we can thank the police chief for bringing that to our attention. The 3 W's consist of wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. A robocall will be sent out today, reminding residents it is crucial not to become complacent, get tested, maintain proper social distancing protocol, wear your mask, wash your hands frequently. Following these guidelines will ensure that we will get through this all together. Please stay safe, and on my behalf and on behalf of the entire Riverhead Town Board, we wish everyone a happy and a healthy holiday season. And no, we will not be monitoring supermarkets and looking at the size of people's turkeys. Moving on to the discussion items, the first item is the police monthly report, and Chief Hagamilla, can you please come forward?
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief. How are you?
Good.
Long last few days, right? Trying to figure out what we're doing.
Getting busy.
Getting
Busier.
busier than ever, I think.
That's it.
I think we're busier now than we were in the middle when we had to close town and go back up, but Riverhead, it's doing pretty good.
Yeah, numbers are up the last couple of days, numbers for COVID are up. Last couple of days, it's been not too bad. I think it was 6 on Tuesday, 6 on Monday, and then we were up on Tuesday by another 10 or so, and then it was steady yesterday, but then again, they'll be up again today, so we definitely have to try our best to bring them down.
Excuse me, Chief, they need you closer to the mic.
Try our best to bring them down, like the
Away.
supervisor said, the 3 W's, wear your mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Also, the safest way to spend Thanksgiving is with your household members only. I know that's hard for everyone to do, hard for me to do, but we really have to try our best to watch our indoor family gatherings also. They feel that that's a place where it spreads, so try to keep that in mind. The crime report is basically status quo. Same trends we've seen all year, I should say. Calls received are down, domestic incidents are down, motor vehicle accidents are down, summonses are down, end of season. Prisoners detained are down, arrests are down. Criminal incidents are the only thing that's really up, but I think in line with the previous months, basically the same areas, but we are still on target. I think as far as year to date from 2020 to 2019, we're almost exactly the same, as we were back in 19, so I see that as a good sign. Non-criminal incidents are down, money's down, and arrests by sector, we really don't know, because we didn't capture it that way last year, so, but I'm sure that's down too.
601 is still the busiest sector.
One, yeah,
Yep.
so,
Chief, I have a question. I see here parole violations. So usually in crime stats, that's not part of the UCI index to report it. And does that affect our overall,
yes, that's in our total, we capture that as far as our total criminal incidents. And we're picking up a number when that happens, so when we do the parole violation arrest, it goes into our stats.
okay. So there is no real crime being
No.
committed against residents or any quality of life crimes?
No,
And that's
it's
where I'm saying that
a parole
usually
violation.
when we do stats on where we're going, you know, to look at the bell curves, where crime has been and is going, that parole violations is not part of that, that system that's in place, so, but I can see what you're saying, you're using it as an
An
arrest.
arrest stat,
So,
right.
and it is a stat, but, okay,
I think next year that will improve hopefully with us going to Niche, our new records management system.
okay.
And that should be up and running sometime mid-year, like June or July, so hopefully that will improve our statistical reporting.
And it looks like we're up in criminal mischief significantly since the beginning of the year. Looks like it keeps going up.
Yes, where are we?
About the 10th
Right,
line down on the
right.
first, page 3.
Yeah, we're still actually below, year-to-date numbers from 2019 on that.
Oh, because I don't see the 2019 numbers for
Right.
the individual columns for criminal mischief.
You have Halloween in there.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Oh, that adds.
A lot of people were complaining about signs going missing during,
Right, for sure,
during the election time.
as usual,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I'm glad to see that the numbers continue to stay down, so it's good. Great work, everybody.
And criminal mischief is a misdemeanor, so,
Misdemeanor.
I mean, I like to monitor the felonies and the violent felonies, because that's what has the most impact on our residents.
Yeah, but when the bail reform, they lowered a lot of the felonies down to
Sure,
misdemeanors,
yeah.
so that's why I'm looking at that number.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you have a robbery and you compare it, yeah, it's,
The bail reform and how that affects us is very hard to track, and I know I've said this before, but, we don't compare ourselves to Southampton, who they arrest over there, who they release, and whether they're committing a crime over here.
Yep.
Very hard to track. As I say, next year with Niche, we're all gonna be on Niche, so
Good.
all the East End departments will be on Niche. The county will be the, hub, and we'll be the spokes on that program, so I
Well,
think.
that would be very
you-
informative in correcting bail
Mhm.
reform and
And
just
even
seeing
the,
the information.
yeah, no, and even the DA's office is gonna be on that too, so, I think it'll be a big improvement.
Good. I'm glad
When is that
to see,
expected
I'm
to be
glad to
on?
see there'll be better monitoring.
Yes,
So-
mid
Good.
next year, so June or July, that should be up and running. They're working on it right now, so they have it up and running it, not using it in the county, but we have actually, a police officer up there working on it with the county as far as making sure they're capturing what we wanna capture too, so.
so, getting back to what Jody mentioned, that with the bail reform, the charges are reduced, but that's in court. That's not part of these crimes, correct? Or am I-
Correct. These-
Jody, am I missing something?
Right, the issue here, I
So the
think.
reform bill is when you get charged with a
Gonna
certain,
finish.
yeah, a certain crime, from what I understand, and correct me this way. And then, and the courts decide that they're gonna lower it, they're gonna figure it out, and then I wanna see the correlation to these crimes.
Right,
here.
I think what the councilwoman is referring to is the fact that people are being released that should really, or were held in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and they're being released, and then they're committing a crime again. As I say, it could be happening in Southampton where they're released and coming here and committing a crime. Or no, I know of two actually defendants in, Riverhead that we arrested,
Mm-hmm.
were released, and went out and committed a crime again. So we know we have at least two that we can document that happening in Riverhead, so.
So with our new system, will we be able to track what the councilwoman's
I
talking
think we will be
about?
able to actually,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a good indicator to give you a sense of,
how that's working.
yeah,
Yeah.
where to, and then, do we do anything on, crime, profiling at all?
As far as, yes, so.
Usually you have a tracking system, so let's say you have a wave on Main Street of robberies, that you can do some, analysis,
Right.
some artificial intelligence on it, where you can start tracking, dates and times, and is it on the weekend, possible suspects, and,
It will definitely, we don't basically have that in the town as of yet, but next year we will with the niche program. The
Okay.
county does follow crime patterns and does release a report to me, I think almost on a daily basis, they give it to me, so.
because crime plannings are, I've worked with them extensively at a very high level, obviously, when I was in New York City, and we're dealing with millions of people. But if we saw a cluster, and an increase in crime, I would say, criminal mischief, and we can identify a location, then you can target that location. And it's a very, very effective form of policing, and I'm glad to know that we're going in that direction next year. So I think that that's in place.
Right.
I think we're gonna see our crime rate substantially low.
But the county, as I said, the county does share that information out, and there have been arrests working with the county as far as the same crime being committed up west that's being
Mhm.
committed out here, and we have solved cases that way. I would say our, crime analyst, Detective Sergeant Frost, keeps a good eye on our crimes in the town, and he's able to, establish local patterns within our town, so.
And just to go back to the history of this, at one time, the way patterns were tracked were on pin maps. So you
Yeah.
had the whole sector, remember that?
Yep.
And you had the whole sectors, and then red was for homicide, and green was for this, and yellow, and if you see like a lot of red, and then you go into it, so, that's what technology has done in, 30 years, which is good to see, and those results you get immediately.
We do actually have the ability to produce, pin maps from our RMS system.
Perfect, okay,
And we do use them, so.
And I
perfect.
guess a concern that I had essentially is like pettit larceny and talking about that, I mean, it says if you steal something and it's less than $999.99, it's pettit larceny versus $1,000 is grand larceny, so those are the numbers that I'm curious to see, because that was a significant change that Justice Smith had, brought to my attention, along with several other crimes that were minimized as far as what the penalties were, or whether or not you could be held on bail.
Right.
So that's what I'm interested in looking at the most, is those crimes that are committed that were knocked down a level to where the penalties weren't as severe.
Not too many people are held these days, so.
No, I know.
It's gotta be a severe crime.
Yeah, and I mean, the list of crimes, when you're moving it from one column over to the other, and saying that this is not, you get a smack on the hand versus this, there are very few crimes left in that column that you can actually hold somebody on. So those are the things that I would like to identify and help, if the numbers are high in that particular instance for that particular crime, and they're let go continually, and, but I guess once we get the niche system up, then that will
Come back.
probably,
Dave,
Um,
just aside from the bail reform, do you think they may not have been holding people as long because of COVID? Do you think COVID is?
No, I think that all came
Affecting
about before, no.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was something that played into
Yeah, no.
anything at all.
I think the jail census was way down before, COVID came about, so.
Chief, could you just take a moment to explain, just from reading some of the comments on different articles that are written, in particular, the body that was located up on Roanoke Avenue, I don't think the residents fully understand why homicide from Suffolk County comes out here, how they're paid, how it's set up, crime scene, there's different things.
As you know, Tim, there's no duplication of effort there whatsoever.
Right.
So, I've argued this point for many years, because I've been here a long time, but, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office wants us to use homicide to investigate our homicides, because when it comes time to the trial end of it, They wanna be, the DA's office wants to know what detectives they're dealing with, as far as testimony and stuff like that
And
goes.
accessibility
Right.
probably
And
too.
how to testify and all that, I mean, so it's, definitely something that they want us to continue. And I feel Suffolk County gives us a great shake as far as investigating homicides. And we don't lose the local factor either, because we have a detective assigned to it, and anything they wanna know about the local dealings or how things work in Riverhead or people in Riverhead, they turn immediately to us, and we're able to provide them with that information, which helps them greatly too, so. It's
And this-
working hand in hand, and as I say, I don't see as far as any duplication of work, so.
And
No,
the
not
state
at all, but
troopers-
the tax money, it's
Tax money.
not costing us anything for
Correct.
them
So-
to come in, because it's already
Right,
provided
that's
for.
Right,
Right.
homicides paid out of the Suffolk County 01 fund.
Right.
Which we all pay into, so
Mhm.
we get that service back.
Aviation,
Aviation.
crime scene, arson.
Not crime scene you get, if homicide comes out, they're able to call crime
Okay,
scene. and-
okay, so I got you on that.
To do it,
Right.
so.
And the state troopers come out too and do reenactments if there's a,
We
like
use-
when there was the fatality on Sound Avenue from the person that had passed away, they reenact the crime scene so
Right.
that they're specialized
Right, we
to do
use-
that.
We use, right, the state police, their accident investigation unit to do our crime scenes, I'm gonna call it that, as far as motor vehicle accidents, so. And they do a great job.
Mhm.
And Tim, you bring up a good point, because I've been approached, does homicide come out? And, certain Suffolk County units, concerning homicide, I can tell you from experience, it's a very, very rigorous, intensive training. You have to be trained by the FBI, you have to know criminal profiling, and you have to keep up, the officers who take the case are usually off performing their duties in Riverhead, and it's a very, very lengthy investigation, sometimes weeks. Two officers collecting evidence, bringing it to the lab, or bringing it to Washington, to Quantico, to the FBI lab, and I know it's a very, very extensive, and if we did homicide investigations, and it would not be fruitful for us to do it, the expense would be enormous, and the personnel, cause they're so highly trained, like you said, you would have to revamp the police department, and then you have to have evidence collection, you have to have a whole system of delivery, you have to have the chain of evidence, I mean, it's just very, very, it's not, an easy, and just to note that 70% of all homicides that occur in the United States are assault, and it's usually somebody who's acquainted, okay? And, but it's a lot of work, the interview and the canvas, and I can see why it belongs there, and it should stay there.
Yeah, it's not that our detectives don't do a great job, they do. It's not that they can't do it, they can. However, the experience, these guys up in Suffolk County are doing it
That's all they do.
24/7. And here, thank God, we don't see homicide that often.
Right.
So the experience there, you wouldn't have it, so.
And they have the crime lab too, and they're building the new crime lab, which is, $5 million expense to the county to build the new crime lab, so that they can test for DNA and things that are left after a crime, so.
Right.
It's,
Well, it's good I'm glad you cleared it up for people, because.
I hope I did.
Yeah, no, I think it's good, and,
Yeah.
since it's
Well,
not an extra expense to us,
Yeah,
it's
no,
something that we're already paying into.
Yeah.
It
Thanks
doesn't
for
happen
bringing it
that
up.
often, so when it does, people, well, why are they out here, It's like, well,
Let's thank
there's a
God
whole
it doesn't
system
happen that
set up,
often.
this is
It
how
does
it
work,
works.
so.
And then
But-
as far as us being down police officers and the academy for Suffolk County not opening up, I don't know if there's been conversations with Nassau County as far as putting
We
some of
are-
our people in.
Yeah, no, we are looking for other academies in case the county doesn't offer an academy this year, so, or next year. I heard possibly next September they might have one.
Ugh.
That's no good for us, so, we would be looking, shopping around for other academies.
Cause how many are we down now?
We're down 9 officers.
No, no.
We're having interviews on November 30th, so, and the good news is the list, so out of the 21 that scored high enough to be in this canvassing or this group of people, we have 13 or 14 candidates that have passed all testing, so that's good news.
And I think, Chief, are we inquiring to see if, cause Nassau might be putting a class in?
We are.
There's a possibility,
Yep.
so I think we're waiting, I think we asked, correct?
Yep.
So, we might be going to Nassau, but everybody in Suffolk County is faced with the same situation. So I don't think that they're gonna enhance their class or double up on their class, so hopefully we're in there with, they'll take us over, other counties.
It's a
I've
big
also-
problem, cause aren't there only 60 people that they take into the academy?
I don't know if they have limits like that, it's usually a class of 50, but I know they have been bigger than that in the past. They have run 2 classes simultaneously, so I think the problem is the county and their funding is the issue as far as getting the class going, so. But we'll find a place, don't worry.
Okay, great.
I am worried when more than 10% of our police officers are not out on the street.
It's a big number, for sure.
Yeah.
But the good news, in this grouping of candidates, we have some options as far as people that are already certified as
Okay.
police officers, so that might help us in the short term.
Good.
To get over the
Looks
hump.
like a good list, I looked
Yeah.
it over.
Yes, me too, I'm very happy with it. And we'll let you know next month.
Okay,
Excellent.
great,
I'd
thank
like
you,
to see the list too,
Okay,
please.
thank you, chief.
okay.
Thank you.
3 Ws.
Yeah,
That's
I know, I
right.
said, in your next career, you and Larry can both be like air traffic controllers. Larry's back there going like this, you're going like this.
That's it. Watch your distance. Okay.
All
Happy
right.
Thanksgiving.
Likewise.
Same to you.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving.
The next discussion item is engineering update on Meeting House Creek Wetland Restoration Project at Church Lane. Jude Dillingham, can you come forward, please?
Did somebody pull the fire alarm right now?
Uh-oh.
It's overheating down there. See some steam. Yes.
Good morning,
Morning, everybody.
how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Okay, so the purpose of this meeting is to give you an update on the reconstruction of the Meeting House Creek wetland, which is across the street from Church Lane where it outlets on Route 25. Right now, we are in the RFP phase for design. I believe that comes to a close soon, but, the people who are coming up from the PEP will be able to give us an update on that. Are they up yet? No, that's Joyce. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, how is everybody?
Good, how
Hi.
are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Joyce, could you introduce yourself?
I can. My name is Joyce Novak. I'm the director of the Peconic Estuary Partnership. And we're here today to give you an update on the Meeting House Creek Stormwater Management and Wetland Restoration Project in Riverhead.
Great, thank you, welcome.
And I can't see if the presentation is up. I was told it would be loaded.
Not yet.
But we do
I'll
have
have it.
we have a hard copy.
Oh, you have a hard copy?
Yes, I do.
Well, I think I can share my screen here. And let's just see if this works. How about now? Can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. So the Meeting House Creek Wetland Restoration Program, which we presented to you last year, is an EPA-funded wetland restoration program that also serves as stormwater management. So nothing from the last presentation has changed, but the timeline is delayed, and we're just going to sort of refresh your memory a little bit about the project. This is a 2.6 acre town of Riverhead property that's bordered by the Aquabog Cemetery to the west, and private property to east and the south, including the Crescent Duck Farm downstream of the site. It's the uppermost limit of surface waters associated with Meeting House Creek and is tidally influenced wetland. And it's part of a larger watershed that extends about 32 acres north of Main Road, and the stormwater wetland is intended to improve about 5.5 acre section of the Meeting House Creek watershed. So we completed a conceptual design in 2019, which was a stakeholder-based process. So there was a lot of input from the town and from the community in this design. And so that's what you see in front of you there. There's about 20,000 square feet of meandering zones of low and high marsh. We worked closely with DEC Freshwater Wetlands about what would be allowed and permitted at the site, so that would help us moving forward with some of these plans and permitting. It'll involve 33,000 square feet of shrub swamp with a deep water forebay and micro pool zones, including a 2.5-foot earthen berm to provide extreme flood control. This project follows the conceptual design and the engineering design will follow the New York State Stormwater Manual Standards, which means that it will offer 100-year storm protection and 90% of runoff from a storm event. It also includes an emergency spillway to allow for stormwater in excess of the 100-year event to flow downstream into the wetlands. The current wetland area is about 1 acre. This will increase that to about 1.2 acres. More importantly, the ecological value of the habitat will increase exponentially. And so, as you may have heard, we have also released our new conservation management plan here at the Peconic Estuary Program. This is a 10-year management strategy of the watershed. The writing of this plan included intense 2-year outreach to towns and the state and the county and communities, to the scientific community, to local communities, and it's a series of 4 goals, 8 objectives, and 35 actions to manage for clean water, healthy habitats, and climate resiliency in the watershed. So this project aligns with this under our clean water objective, which is objective F, to reduce current and future inputs of toxics, pathogens, and marine debris into groundwater and surface waters, and to minimize their impacts. Under this objective, we have Action 21, which is to expand non-point source sub-watershed management plans to all pathogen-impaired water bodies. So we know that Meeting House Creek is a pathogen-impaired water body. So this helps us to achieve Action 21. It also speaks to Objective H, healthy ecosystems, to restore and protect key habitats and species diversity in the Peconic Estuary. Action 31 is to use available habitat quality assessment and climate change resiliency tools to prioritize wetland restoration projects identified in the 2020 PEP Habitat Restoration Plan, and to implement top priority projects. Meeting House Creek was identified 2 years ago as a priority project in our watershed, and so that's when the management committee moved to start allotting funds to this project. So due to COVID, the timeline for this project is adjusted. Originally, this was put out to bid in the spring, and we had every intention of moving forward, but with everybody else, the project was delayed, and so here we are. The RFP is currently out again. The closing date is December 2nd, so we're very excited. There's been a lot of questions and interest in this project, so we hope to execute a contract by the end of January 2020 with an engineering firm. Drew is on the project team, and so will be a part of not only selecting the contractor, but giving us guidance through the engineering design process. The development of the designs and permitting will run through the end of 2021. We anticipate permitting will probably take a long time, so we're giving that to the end of December 2022. So this project should be wrapped up by the end of December 2022. In the meantime, we are also trying to source, or will be over the next 2 years, looking to source funds for the construction portion, which has an estimated cost of $530,000. And we'll be looking at New York State water quality improvement grants to potentially be that source of funding for that project. In this timetable, we have anticipated project meetings. We have our kickoff meeting We have a meeting at 90% draft design and at final design. And then a final one at 100% design. So part of this process will be putting together a steering committee. And so that steering committee in the PEP program office will be participating in all of those meetings. As always, if yourselves or somebody you recommend would like to be a part of that, please reach out. That's absolutely something that we can accommodate. So that's kind of it. Does anybody have questions on this project? Or Drew, did you have anything to add here?
As far as the state.
Joe, did you have anything to add?
Sorry?
Wanna add anything?
Did you wanna add anything to the,
Yeah, I had one question. I know we've discussed this before. Do you have people in mind, Joyce, for the steering committee already? Or is that pretty much open?
It's pretty much open. We, of course, will include DEC, we'll include Suffolk County, we'll include whoever you recommend from Riverhead. But as I said earlier, and we have talked about, I would very much like you as the town engineer in Riverhead to be leading us in this process and really guiding this project along, because it is town property, and really the ultimate purpose is the increased ecological value and the coastal resiliency that this project offers the town.
On a project like this, are there typically residents involved in the steering committee or not?
So not typically. Sometimes we will have a representative from community groups or homeowners associations. But we can certainly talk about what that looks like. Elizabeth Hornstein is on the line. I don't know if she has anything to add to if she had anybody in mind for a steering committee.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
Good
I
morning.
think Joyce pretty much laid it out. And Drew, just to your last question, like Joyce said, we wouldn't normally have members of the public maybe necessarily involved in the steering committee, but we could certainly give a more, we could talk about doing that, or we could give a more public presentation for the community. We have done that with some of our other projects where we'll hold, a community public meeting where we present on the project and allow the community to provide any feedback or ask questions, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because this is gonna be a high-profile project in a high-profile location. So I think it would be beneficial to everyone to get public input at some point.
Yeah, we don't wanna have the same thing that we had with, the North Fork Preserve, where all the people on Sound Shore Road were, calling in as the construction was starting, and they were not notified, so the timeframes have to be
Yes.
laid out for the public. And that was one of my questions that I have for you on the conceptual design plan, which is item number 10, which is the maintenance, access, entry, and egress. It looks like it's going out onto a private drive instead of on the State Road 25.
Right, I think that issue has come up, and that corner, right, is intended to go right to, that outlet goes right to the main drive. It doesn't actually cross that private drive.
Okay.
But that's something that the engineering design will, of course, make clearer.
Okay, thank you.
I think we saw that in one option, is going to be an easement, but we're not gonna know until we get a hard survey. That's the first thing we need. So once we get a survey, then a real survey, then we'll know what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't really force an easement unless you condemn it.
Not gonna force an easement.
Yeah, but if it's on a private drive, the people may not want the construction trucks coming in and out of their private drive.
That's true, but I think this is a good project, that's
Oh,
why
I
we want everyone
agree.
involved.
I agree, but if there was a way to get it onto the state road, but I'm sure the engineers will work that out, because you
Yeah.
can't force somebody to give you an easement on their private driveway.
Right, and there were several, options in this conceptual design, as Drew just stated, so I think that we can, that's something that has to be worked out. There were some, questions in this particular area too about, pitch and drainage, which have to still be surveyed. So I think once they work those, things out, that's really the function of the steering committee to address issues exactly like that.
Yeah, and then as far as the funding, I mean, sitting with the Peconic Estuary Program for many years, before Catherine took it over, it seems as though they're cutting your budget back 5% every year, the EPA, and I'm just wondering if, you know, the anticipated costs would be expected to be covered when construction starts in 2022, because the costs are also going to vary between now and 2022, if it's out for bid now and the construction doesn't start until 2022.
So I will say that last year we got an increase from 600,000 to 662,000 from the federal government.
Okay.
And that is anticipated to go up over the next several years, although I obviously cannot speak to that, concretely. But the construction costs for this program are not as yet, to be coming out of our federal funds. So the design costs, the management committee voted to have come out of our federal funds. We will be looking for, New York State grant funding will be our first, application for construction funds for this project. We don't have those funds secure as yet, but that will be the first place that we look.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to help you with that.
Hopefully you will.
And this is at no cost to the town, except for, Drew, our engineer's time, correct?
That is correct. Drew is, we will be using some of his time as a Riverhead contribution to the project.
And I just wanted to say that, well, I'm excited, I'm the liaison, as Jody mentioned, to the Peconic Estuary Partnership. And I'm actually very excited to take over the chairmanship of the governance committee. So I shall be working closely with Elizabeth and Joyce. And actually, the partnership between Drew, the engineering department, and Peconic Estuary is really nice to see, and I appreciate the work done by all.
Thank you so much.
And I'm happy to step up and help with the steering committee if needed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Okay, great.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Drew, for the update, and, moving forward, we have Greg Berman here to discuss, the Manorville, water hookup. Last Thursday, November
Bye, Joyce.
7th.
Bye, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last Thursday, November 7th at 7 p.m., the Navy held a WebEx. I did not attend, but I got two different briefings.
Are you doing Nextera first, or are you doing the water?
We're doing great.
I thought,
I have here building.
Yeah, 'cause building planning matters surrounding the memo,
Okay,
November 17th,
disregard, that was
Calverton
my,
Solar.
you're right, you're correct, and we're gonna do, Greg, sorry. So Greg, we're gonna do the, Calverton Solar, thank you, Jody, for making sure. So he's here on building planning matters surrounding the planning department, a memo dated November 17th, 2020. It regards, Calverton Solar Energy Center, also known as Nextera. We are here, we've had a public hearing, we've had work sessions, we have had executive sessions in this regard. So we are here just solely to address 3 matters on the memo.
Correct. Good morning, Madam Supervisor. As you stated, I'm here to discuss the November 17th memo, which was distributed to the board. There's really 3 remaining critical aspects that need to be addressed and would need some direction from the board prior to drafting a resolution. One of them being a recreation trail and potential easement. At the November 4th public hearing, a member of the public did make a recommendation to the town board to see if they would consider or require asking for an easement or some other offering of dedication of land around the western solar parcel. Now there's 2 parcels, just to refresh your memory, one being the Long Island Sports Park along Edwards Avenue, the other being a historically farmed parcel to the west of that, which is accessed by River Road. The question was raised if the town would be able to get an easement in order to be able to connect the existing EPCAL recreational bike trail and just perform kind of construct kind of a spur trail around the perimeter of this solar farm. So the Alternative Transportation Committee did meet on this, I believe it was last Friday. They were generally in favor of it. There's some, logistical issues just about defining the areas. I did do some rough calculations. It would require approximately a 1,200 linear foot connection to the existing EPCAL trail through a wooded portion of land. Now Jeff Murphy did go out yesterday and do a site visit. Upon inspection, it was discovered that there was, it was either a farm road or some other historic trail, which the establishment of an easement and the establishment of this trail would not necessarily require any additional tree clearing. It seems as though there was a path that would connect cleanly right to the EPCAL bike trail in order to facilitate connection. There are just some questions, being that the applicant, we have not seen a map or a survey showing this easement, whatever size it would be to be determined by the board, around the western solar parcel. There would be some, obviously, setbacks if they need to modify their fence line and landscaping, but I'm pretty confident, based on the size of the parcel, that if the town were to get a 15-foot easement around the perimeter of that property, I don't think there would be any significant impacts to the siting of the solar farm. You're talking about 15 feet around, so tighten it up by 30 feet, I would be confident that they'd be able to establish that. So, general consensus, I'm sorry.
If I could just say, so, Sharon Dunnigan, thank you, said that if we're going to allow the solar, we should be getting something, a community benefit from them, and I said, well, what about, a hiking trail or donation? We discussed that, and instead of the hiking trail, I saw an opportunity to extend the recreation trail and do a paved path. So I immediately called for a meeting with the Alternative Transportation Committee, which I did attend via Zoom. We discussed it. We discussed that where the solar panels are not going on the proposed plan right now, that there might be an easement area that doesn't necessarily need to be depicted today. It can just be stated in the special permit that an easement area outside of where the solar panels are to be placed would be granted by the applicant. The applicant would sign on to any grant applications because they would own the property. And that we would work with them in the future if the extension of that trail was a feasible and a route they wanted to take. So the Alternative Transportation Committee thought it was a great idea. We discussed, possibly going through the woodlands. We discussed compatible growth area and the Pine Barrens and whether or not that would need a hardship. In all actuality, with the Pine Barrens Commission, when it comes to recreation trails through the compatible growth area, I think that they would be amenable to that, but our supervisor would know more extensively, and I'm sure she would advocate for it if we did have to go to the Pine Barrens Commission for a hardship in order to construct the trail. But I think that what you're saying, and I'm pleased to hear, is that when Jefferson went out, that there is a pathway that we can create the trail in an area where there are no solar panels being proposed currently, and that we could successfully extend the trail possibly another 2 miles. Or another loop coming back in and tying back into the Grumman Trail, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Trail.
Correct.
And how wide would you estimate this trail to be?
Well, the trail itself would be 10-foot wide paved, so we would need probably 15 to 20 feet for construction.
I would think, probably 15 to 20 feet, and again, this is just conceptual right now. The question was raised, we do have the paved EPCAL bike trail. When Jefferson did take a look at it, he did note that if you were looking for more of an off-road experience, like I ride mountain bikes, with the knobby tires, this might even be something where we have the paved trail. There might not necessarily even be a need for improvement or pavement. If just to provide a more of an off-road type of.
Off-road experience?
Correct, like more similar to a single track as opposed to just a paved bike trail.
So this would be phase 3, because phase 2, we had already worked with the DEC, which would be west of the EPCAL trail on the western border. That would go into the core area, and that would be a limestone trail that I had worked out with Rob Marsh. So that would be the off-road fat bike trail, and that extends, I think, another 5 miles around. So it would go west from Grumman Boulevard at the entrance right across from the DEC, parking area. It would go west all the way down to Wading River Road on the perimeter road of Grumman, and then it would go down Wading River Road and then come back east again on 25 to connect to the paved trail. So that would be the limestone off through the core area, and it would be about 5 miles. So this one I see as more of an extension of a paved trail for the bicyclists or for, you know, I mean, it could even
Hiking,
be
walking,
a
hiking.
kiddie trail for 2 miles where you have the strollers and there's a lot of opportunity. So I'm glad that the applicant is amenable to granting us the easement, and I think that the special permit that with the community benefits that we had discussed and that everybody seems to be in agreement with, that it was an acceptable community benefit as far as the monetary value, and then with the easement, that in the special permit, it could just specify that there would be an easement area of 20 feet wide outside of where the solar panels are being proposed, and that a covenant would be filed to that effect, so
And-
that,
So I'm just wondering, have there been previous discussions with the applicant about this? Has anyone met with the applicant about this?
I did speak with the applicant yesterday. He seemed amenable to the concept of granting an easement. There was initial conversations about potentially deeding the land. I don't think that's gonna be, the path going forward.
No.
But the granting of an easement, the applicant seemed to be amenable to it. And
And the
again,
applicant is here before us, and we'll give him the opportunity to speak. But I have one question, who's gonna maintain this trail?
well, the town would, just as we do the 10-mile trail or the 9-mile trail with the pavement, so, but that was all built with grant funding, and the maintenance equipment for the trail, such as the mower and the blower and all of those other items were also purchased with the grant money, so hopefully we'll be able to do the
Okay.
same thing through the state of New York and the county of Suffolk. I did have a lengthy conversation with our attorney, Bob Kozakevich, expressed to him as far as what I was looking for. He said that he was going to speak to the attorney for the applicant, and I'm happy to hear that he did. And I guess we'll hear from,
Yes, let's
Yeah.
hear from the applicant. Can you unmute him, Chip, please? He's unmuted? Okay.
It's unmuted.
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Good morning, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can
thank
hear you.
Well,
Morning.
good morning to the entire board. Stephen Lo Squadro on behalf of the applicant. Specifically with respect to the question that you posed, and particularly that of Ms. Kent. Yes, I have discussed this with Mr. Bergman, and in addition with Mr. Kozakevich. And I understand, of course, as does the applicant, the desire of the councilwoman to extend the bike trail, and we're pleased to work to make that happen. I wouldn't see anything in what we're talking about here conceptually that would prevent the board from moving forward with a vote on the special permit, because we do agree in principle. And the only thing that we did discuss with Mr. Kozakevich and Mr. Bergman are matters that they already brought to your attention, that of course, with respect to the granting of the easement, questions of construction and funding and grants, of course, that would be the town's responsibility, and the town would pursue that, and we'd cooperate appropriately, of course. And then, of course, if there are issues down the road that have to be addressed so that it would be accommodated by the Pine Barrens Commission, well, then, of course, the town would have to make appropriate applications, as the councilwoman mentioned. Whatever consent for applications to be made, of course, we'd provide appropriate consents. But with the understanding that that would be the town's endeavor, the applicant is happy to accommodate, because we recognize that this is an additional benefit beyond the significant benefits that are already been negotiated, that would benefit the residents of the town.
and as I had discussed with the board, that the Community Benefit Fund for Public Health and Recreation, that a portion of that funding that's being allocated from the community benefit could be possibly used as a match for the grant. Any grant through the state or through the county. So sometimes they require a 20% grant. So now that we're closing up all of our grants, and you're working very closely with the CDA, and all those outstanding grant applications are being wrapped up, we'll be eligible to apply for more grants that have to do with recreation and possibly the extension of the trail.
And that's the purpose of this type of funding.
Yes.
Exactly, thank you.
Right, and we do have, and actually the Recreation Department has a long list that they put together as
Okay,
well, in
good.
addition to that. I wondered, Bob, were you going to address this at all? Bob?
Address what?
Well, you had had some discussions, did you have anything you thought we should know about or to bring up or to add to this discussion?
To what aspect? To respect to the trail?
Yes.
You know, again, as, you know, I don't know if I gotta go up there.
Oh, you don't have a mic, sorry. Oh, there it is.
Okay, you have
See,
a
can
mic, you
use
can
your
stay
phone.
there.
I mean, as
There you
already
go.
pointed out by council, Mr. LaSquadro, we did discuss it, the question of whether it would be a fee, or an easement, I think has already been put out there that it would, the idea is to do this if it can be accomplished by an easement. You know, certainly I think, as far as whether the project would be able to be qualified under the proposed funds that are set forth in a community benefit agreement, which is still being, you know, discussed, I don't see a reason why it couldn't be accomplished within that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering all the questions, but I think with respect to the question of the trail, that was the nature of the discussion I had with council. I think also, as I pointed out at the public hearing, there is some language that I don't have in front of me right now in the code at dealing with special permits, which talks about open spaces or places of assembly as part of the project. So I think that there's also an ability to weave it into the code as part of the approval process.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so, moving forward, anyone have any more comments? I think we pretty much hashed this particular point. The next, area to address is the duration of the special permit. Greg, can you please expand on this?
Correct. So, at the offset of this application, the applicant has requested a special permit for a duration of 30 years, which is, I believe, to match the RFP that was put out by LIPA. Pursuant to our town code, section 301-282Q, any special permit approval which is granted under this article shall have a term of 20 years commencing from the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or a certificate of compliance, which may be extended for additional 5-year terms upon application to the town board. To date, there's been really no concrete direction as to the desire to grant the 30-year special permit as requested by the applicant, or the 20-year duration, which is prescribed by the code. I do note that when S-Power 1, which is the previous project that was reviewed by the planning board, not to be confused with the one under Article 10 by the state, that was initially granted for 20 years. Upon their completion of their secret process, they went through a positive declaration, finding statement. Upon the completion of that process, they did request 2 additional 5-year extensions, which were withdrawn by the applicant. So that S-Power 1 facility right now has a 20-year special permit. It's really the decision of the board whether they want to grant the 20-year versus the 30-year.
All right, so that's really interesting, and that's something that we have to consider, and we should resolve this matter today. So can we have comments from the board, please?
I mean, for me, I'd rather stick with the 20 years. I mean, if at later down the road it comes up, we could address it again, correct, Greg?
Correct.
And, I mean, just one of the points in the next one, you know, it says, it talks about 30 years, in talking about the decommissioning and the materials, it's 30 years is difficult, if not impossible, to predict and calculate.
Correct. And I mean, I don't want to jump to the next section yet, but they are
Oh,
sort of
go ahead.
they are sort of correlated. I mean, you know, we are talking about a significant duration of time. We don't know what renewable energy markets are going to be like in
Right.
20 years, let alone 30 years. You know, I don't know, again, how it impacts the RFP process through the applicant. I really think that's something they need to address. You know, the fact that LIPA PSEG has put out this 30-year duration, really I don't feel obligates the town to commit themselves to a 30-year commitment of land. So I mean, that's really a decision for the board to I mean, town
Right,
board,
so
per their code, fully within your right to grant the 20 years. And then, you know what, in 10 or 15 years, when we have a better understanding of where we're headed at that time, the town board can, you know, grant those extensions if desired.
And that would be my feeling, 30 years is just pretty far in advance to, you know, make a prediction, and I mean, let's face it, there have been some community concerns here, so, you know, for me, I would prefer to stick with the 20.
Okay, Jody, can you, let us know where you stand on this matter?
Yeah, I think that 20 years from now, somebody's probably, once EPCAL gets built out, someone's probably gonna be coming and saying to the applicant, hey, we wanna do an industrial development project here, and we wanna build 100 or 200,000 square feet of industrial space, so get rid of the solar panels so we can come in. I don't think that you can predict what's gonna happen 25 or 30 years from now, but I really don't care if it's 20, 25, or 30 years. I don't know if there's a mechanism in the code to get us there, but to me, with what's being discussed right now as far as traffic concerns and everything within the 11933 zip code, I think that solar is the least impacting on the community as far as build out and the concerns of the 11933 zip code. I know that the solar right now is a permitted use in the zoning code. I don't know what the master plan will bring as far as future uses for this project site, but I think that, I don't have a problem with the solar being there 25, 30 years. As a matter of fact, I think that when the master plan gets looked at, the zoning from industrial is probably gonna get knocked down to something that is going to be, less than what is permitted now in that zoning district. So, I don't have a problem with the solar being there.
Okay, Tim?
We've set the standard prior for 20 years, so I'm willing to stick with 20 years.
Okay, and,
Yeah, I feel the same way. You know, it's hard to predict what's gonna happen in 30 years. I think, 20 is sufficient, and with the opportunity, if it is necessary, to renegotiate that. I do wanna just, bring up one point. I had, Chamber of Commerce, meeting this morning. And even though we're just displacing a farm on one aspect, we are displacing the, Long Island Game Center too. And it was asked of the committee to me to see if the town would be amenable to trying to find an alternative spot for that recreational use. So I said I would bring it to the board, and that's why I'm,
Well,
doing
that was that's a good point, Frank. I mean, that was one of the concerns, that was a recreational property.
Right.
So,
So I just wanted to put that
That's a
out there,
good
because it's fresh in my mind.
Absolutely, that property provided a lot of activities
Yes.
for a lot of, not only our youth, but youth from around the area. And if we could certainly be of assistance in locating another property to make that happen again, I would totally favor that.
Good.
and we don't have anything like that in Riverhead or nearby, and, you know, it's important that we try to take care and move forward, and the facility is actively used. You know, they have a lot of different
It was
programs.
a perfect location for
I
it,
was
as
just
far
gonna
as I
say,
was
it's a
concerned.
good location.
Off the road, it was
Yeah.
set back,
Close to the
And it
Expressway.
employs a lot
area.
of people as well, so, you
Right.
know, it has a lot of different aspects to it, but if we could keep that in mind going through.
Yeah, and when you do the master plan update, there might be incentives from the community benefit zoning for a facility like the hockey rink or somewhere else to move into those recreational overlay districts when you're working on the master plan.
Okay, so, everybody gave where they stood on this issue, and again, I think I'm gonna concur with Jody, that, whether it's, 2030, we can renegotiate this, and, the matter has been resolved, I guess, and that, I think number 2 and number 3, as mentioned before, it is, connected, and, you know, let's go on to item number 3, decommissioning the plan and the bond, and just have a healthy discussion on that.
Madam
I think this
Supervisor?
is- Yes,
I just wanted to, just clarify the record and just add a comment or two with respect to the term. Just to put it in proper context, clearly the code allows for the extensions. It doesn't matter when you seek them. So the applicant here from the very get-go, in meeting with this board, in meeting with staff, in meeting with the planning board, has indicated the desire for the 30 years by requesting the extensions up front because as Mr. Bergman pointed out, that conforms to the PPA that LIPA is seeking to grant. So it's something that's been established and set forth and requested from the very get-go. That's number one. And number two, the applicant is differently situated than S-Power, because remember, S-Power never sought an extension. They only sought initially 20 years. Then, as Mr. Bergman pointed out, at a subsequent time, they did float the thought of requesting an extension, but then they withdrew it, so they never formally made the request. Whereas here, Long Island Solar has said, well, this is what we're requesting, and it's what the code allows, again, to conform to what LIPA is seeking in the PPA that the applicant will enter with LIPA. So I view it as differently situated, and under the circumstances, because it's been requested up front in that manner, I believe it's an appropriate request.
And I understand your points, but certainly you understand we are not obligated to the 30 years. It's at our discretion. And the way I'm understanding it today, 3 of us are not in favor of going beyond the 20 years. Only Councilwoman Giglio and the supervisor would go to the 30 years.
And that's exactly what the vote was when we took it.
So, out of curiosity, the PPA for S-Power, can anybody tell me whether or not the PPA for S-Power was, because I recall them saying the PPA said that they had to have 30 years.
I don't have the files in front of me. It's been quite some time since I've reviewed them. All I know for certain is that they were granted the special permit for 20 years.
Right.
They did come in and request that 10-year extension to 5 years, and it was withdrawn. So they, right now they've I don't know what their PPA was. I can't speak to that with any knowledge, so I can't
But I'd be curious to see that, because I think that through the S-Power process, Bob, if I'm not mistaken, we were asking for a copy of the PPA to see if they had to go to the 25 or 30 years. Like I said, I don't have a problem with it, whether it's 25 or 30 years, but I think that it is, if it's going to stop the process where the PPA will not be signed by LIPA if you don't get the 30 years, that's something that we need to know.
And Bob, can you add
As
to-
far as with S-Power, I don't recall if we got into the 20 or 30-year discussion with them during the hearing process. It's my understanding or recollection that that 30-year request came much later in the process, either at about the time they went for site plan approval or when we were starting to discuss the community benefits agreement. I don't recall having any discussions with them during the special permit time period at all on the 20 vis-a-vis 30. Also, they're a little bit of a different creature because this involves obviously a joint venture, whereas the S-Power was a private entity or an LLC that was, separate and distinct from the public utility. So I'd have to go back and look at the hearing minutes from S-Power for their 20 meg project, but I have no recollection of that coming up at all.
I'm just curious as to what the PPA says, that's all.
Okay, I don't think we asked for that either, if I recall, during the special permit.
And to be clear, my point was exactly what your 2 was as well. I think it doesn't matter if it's 20 or 25 or 30 years, but with them having the ability to negotiate that at a future date. I don't have doesn't change the permit to me at all if it's 20, 25 or 30. All I'm saying is, if he's got that ability to renegotiate that at a later date, that might be his card to use at that point.
That's my feeling too. I agree with I think it should be kept at 20 years, but with the option of 5-year increments that they can expand it. That's fine, because that's what I agreed to with the other project.
So I just don't know about the uncertainty of the predictability of the outcome if they were to come back 10 years or 15 years from now and ask
To
for
a new
another
board.
2 5-year extensions.
But I think it's
I won't be
to
here.
their advantage to look at it when it comes down the
Why
pipe.
don't we hear from the applicant and see how he feels about that condition, that 20 years with 2 5-year, possible 2 5-year extensions?
Why would we need to do that? Why don't we leave it at 20 and look at it again at 20? Why would we need to make that promise at this point?
Well, we did get a promise that they're gonna try to work on us with an easement, so it's
I thought-
negotiation, that's
It
business.
was my understanding there were concerns about all the solar coming into
There
town.
there is a lot of concern, and people know how we feel about solar in SIPCO 11933. It is somewhat condensed, this is a project that's been in the works for 2 years, and we need to move this forward. And that's why we have a work session to iron this out, and I wanna know if the applicant will wanna make any other statements in this regard.
No, I just, again, and I appreciate the opportunity to have clarified that this matter on our behalf was handled much differently than what was done with S-Power, because S-Power never sought that up front. We've said all along that that's part of our negotiation with LIPA, and it's a fundamental component of what the LIPA PPA will be. So we've been very clear about that, and we've continued that even through the course of the negotiations back and forth, and of course, I give all due credit to the board and Mr. Kazakevich on their behalf, because benefits here that were negotiated are more significant, even on a proportional basis, much more significant than those that were attributed to the S-Power transaction. But again, in addition to that, I just also point out, as I said, that S-Power never sought this initially, and then at a later point in time, when they floated the idea, they withdrew it. So it was never part and parcel of their application, whereas here, it's been a component from the get-go.
I mean, I just would offer anecdotally, with regards to duration of special permits, talking about commitment to land use of a specific parcel. When we look at other site plan applications, for example, one that the planning board is reviewing right now, the HK Ventures proposed industrial complex. There's no limit of duration on those. You know, when we grant a site plan, you know, we're approving a building to be there for 50, 60 years. So I mean, you know, maybe there's something that the board, you know, I mean, treating this somewhat differently, which as one of the, I forgot who pointed out, but you know, the alternative potential is industrial development in these areas. Whereby these solar farms do sort of mitigate traffic, they don't, you know, contribute any nitrogen, trip generation. So I mean, it is sort of a kind of holding pattern, I will say, to prevent further industrialization and require further build out, you know, of that industrial zone. So for all intents and purposes, it is a less intense use than the alternatives.
Well, and certainly there are benefits, I mean, I'm not against solar, there, as you say, it's less intense, the traffic, it's renewable energy, those are all good, but I mean, it is, I don't understand why on one hand, we're talking about a possible solar moratorium, on the other hand, we have an opportunity to either leave it at 20 years for now and then take another look at it, or extend it to 30 years right now, so it doesn't, I know, somehow the reasoning doesn't make sense to me here.
I think we could get some more background information from the applicant perhaps, because I know that the state of New York had a very strong goal and an objective to meet a certain percentage of renewables in New York State from the power companies by a certain year. And there might be something that in that language that LIPA has to comply with the state as far as, you know, creating renewables. I don't know.
Well, Councilwoman, that is correct. We all know that the governor has established two mandates, in essence. One is that utilities, you know, which would include LIPA, Con Edison, Niagara Mohawk, others throughout the state, but utilities in New York State are obligated, so it is a mandate, that 50% of their power must be from renewable energy sources by 2030. It's what we hear, what we've often heard, and you've heard it as well, the so-called 50 by 30 mandate that the governor has set forth. But beyond that, there's an additional mandate then that by 2040, the state must be 100% renewable energy. So you are right, Councilwoman, these things do factor in, because the utilities, these are not just goals, they're mandates. They're going to have to comply with this. Now, again, we know that there are benefits that come from that, because the proliferation of green energy improves our airshed, and it reduces other forms of pollution and other impacts as well. And that's not to mention, of course, as we said on prior occasions with respect to this project, that the nature of the community benefits here that were negotiated, not to mention, of course, the pilot that's going to come from this, is just something that couldn't even be approximated, even remotely so, from any other industrial use. So, for all of those reasons, I do think that the 30-year extension request is appropriate. Obviously, you know, as we leave that to the board's best discretion, but I just wanted to make the record clear with respect to all of those factors that do exist, because you're right, Councilwoman, those are public policy factors that are overarching all of this.
And again, they are mandatory, and I also understand that solar is leading the way on this. Most of these communities that are trying to comply are taking in solar.
Well, certainly with 660 acres of solar coming into Riverhead, we are more than doing our share for the state for renewable energy. So I just want to make that point.
Nowhere does that mandate say that we have to have all the solar needed in that Calverton, Beatty Hollow area. That's
Right.
my point.
And it's all going into, right, to your point, it's all going into 11933.
Right.
So, I mean, that's 660 acres with Nextera, I believe, correct? That will be pegged for solar in the Calverton area.
I believe that's inclusive of everything
Right.
previously approved, including the Article 10 and including this. I believe that is more or less on the point, yes.
So let's get a little bit more focused here. Isn't the topic of the conversation, whether it's gonna be a 20-year, and now we're going into too much in one SIPRO, which you know I feel how I feel about it. There is too much. Let's stay focused. The focus of this conversation today, and it was put on the agenda, is to address the memo. So let's just reel in and just.
Right, we know the solar's going there.
You know the
It's
solar's going there.
Whether it's going there for 20 years, 25, or 30
Right.
years.
These
So-
are all valid points. These all weigh into the big decision.
It's
And I
not a
believe-
deal breaker for me. I don't care if it's 20 or 30. I just thought it was to his advantage to
So are you changing your
investigate.
vote?
I didn't say that to begin with. I said the
Oh.
same thing you did. I said, I don't care if it's 20, 25, or 30.
Okay.
I just thought it was to his advantage, the applicant's advantage, to look at it anew in 20 years and then make the application.
Okay.
But he's saying that he doesn't wanna do that. He
Well,
wants
this
20
is
with
certainly not a
2
deal breaker for me.
5-year extension.
Okay, so let's,
I think I was misinterpreted, actually.
okay, and that's fine, and thank you for being big enough to do that. So, right now, let's get focused, the duration is on a special permit, whether it's 20 years or 30. Councilwoman has stated that, she would support that. I'm gonna support the 30-year. Catherine Ken has stated that she is not in support of the 30-year, so we just need 2 other individuals. Frank is, does it matter to you?
Doesn't matter to me either way. If it's a deal breaker for the applicant, I think they've been more than generous on all of the other
I
issues.
think so also.
But.
That would be our request.
Yes.
Yes, and then,
Absolutely.
Tim?
20 years with the option to revisit it with 5-year extensions.
Okay.
Right.
So just to recap, I believe we've got 2 who support the 20, and we've got the 3 who would
Correct.
support the 30 at the offset. So if I'm to prepare a resolution, I would include 30 years based on the majority opinion of the board right now.
Yes.
All right, so do we want to move on to item number 3?
Yes, and now we're gonna move on, and these are somewhat related, however, and this is where, I reviewed some of the applicants', submissions on this, and this is an area that we need to make sure, because it's a very big concern with the community, and I wanna make sure that the community feels comfortable and understands what's going on, and, Greg, can you go forward with this,
Yeah,
please?
so I'll give a quick recap. So
Right.
pursuant to the town codes, the special permit requirements An applicant for a commercial solar energy system which comprises more than 10 acres shall provide a form of surety, either through an escrow account, a bond, or otherwise, to cover the cost of removal in the event that the town must remove the installation. Basically, this is a decommissioning bond in the event that NextEra, whatever agent it may be, is no longer a solvent organization, that the town of Riverhead is not left holding the bag, so to speak. So the applicant did submit a decommissioning estimate. They valued the cost of decommissioning at $1,116,300. Now, I do note that in that decommissioning estimate, they do, quote, assume that the project components will be sold, salvaged, or recycled to the maximum extent practicable. Now, that is something that I believe is extremely important. 30 years from now, there's no way for us to accurately predict what a recycling market's going to be for solar panels. With the proliferation of them, we have no idea. So the question of should that decommissioning estimate include any recycle, scrap, or salvage value, my opinion is that it may be short-sighted on the town's end. If there's not, and I'd liken it to, the current recycling market for plastics, whereby we see it all over the island, the single-stream recycling. Other nations are no longer buying our recyclable plastic, and we're left with just plastic piling up. So I think it may be in the town's best interest to say that we don't want any recycling value included in that decommissioning estimate. That way we're not left on the hook for any additional recycling costs or any, removal costs.
I agree. I think it should be even clearer in saying that, that number should not be calculated into the actual cost of the decommissioning, because we're just gonna hire a company that's gonna take it and they're gonna do what they want with it, whether they're recycling it or not. And that there should also be a clause in here that says that the applicant will be responsible for any additional costs. The applicant or its subsidiaries, or assessors or assigns, shall be responsible for the cost of any removal above and beyond what the estimate is today.
So the one thing I would say to that, I believe the purpose of the decommissioning bond, suppose NextEra is no longer, solvent organization.
Yep.
Who do we get those funds from? I don't know.
Assessors or assigns, if somebody else buys NextEra and they are doing solar projects throughout the country or doing other projects that may not include solar, it's, NextEra is a pretty big company. I don't know that, and they're nationwide. I don't know that they are going to be going out of business within the next 30 years, but if they do, then their successors or assigns would be responsible, and that should be in a covenant, so that anybody that's interested in acquiring any of the NextEra properties know that they would be responsible for the decommissioning.
And I've heard, nothing against NextEra, but I have heard that a lot of these companies come and go.
Yeah,
Which is a concern, so, we can't know who will have the company down the road.
I do know recently Jefferson just sent me something yesterday. There was some sort of merger or some sort of business deal where S-Power merged or some sort of conglomeration with a company called AES. So, these companies are sort of amorphous. They do kind of float in and out, so.
This is a matter of writing the contract. I think our town attorney can handle that.
Yeah, it's just a covenant, and if there's a merger or an acquisition, that whatever subsidiary is taking over the company, that they'll be responsible for any additional costs above and beyond the bond amount that the town is currently holding.
All right, so I'll work with Bob on the language on that, but we're confident that we don't want that recycle value in there.
No.
Correct.
But what happens if they fold and nobody takes over? Then it's our bag, and I don't want that. So that's gotta be addressed.
So that's what we'll have them reevaluate the decommissioning estimate, take out any scrap resalvage value, so that should be, and again, there's always gonna be a question of what if 30 years down the road, but if we get a security bond or a performance bond or some other form of surety that covers the total cost of removal of the facility, I believe that kind of takes the town out of a jeopardy situation.
Even how do we address what that cost is gonna be, because we have no idea what that market's gonna be 20 or 30 years from now.
Now you're talking 30 years, which makes it even more challenging, so, another reason I wanna stick with the 20.
I think that there should be enough of a cushion in the bond to cover increasing costs over the next, few decades.
And I mean, there is always, you know, we have the bond in the event that Nextera or their successors or assigns, whoever, if they do remove it, they're gonna get that bond, you know, they'll cover the removal and then they get the bond back.
So how about this? How about we do special permit, 20 years, with two 5-year extensions, but they come back in 20 years and we reevaluate what the cost would be to decommission. And the extensions would be contingent upon increasing the bond amount.
I would be amenable to that.
I think that works. Bob, do you have any input on that or opinion?
Wow, that's my opinion. We can, I'll have the discussion with
You have
Mr.
it as a
Squadron.
right,
I
it's
mean,
just a matter of
well,
what
well,
the
the code
decommissioning cost.
obviously could have probably been drafted a little bit clearer to indicate when the extensions would be able to be achieved. It is a little unclear, it's a little bit vague, it simply says 20 years with two 5-year extensions. It doesn't indicate when those 5-year extensions can be applied for. And of course, when, you know, as we all know, when you're applying the code, if it's not particularly clear, doesn't work in benefit of the municipality. That said, though, I think that, you know, imposing a condition is something we can investigate with the applicant. Are we talking about just coming back in 20 years to investigate the decommissioning costs? Is
Yes.
that- So it would be for that narrow discussion only?
Yes.
Yeah, just for,
Okay.
point number 3, what we discussed on 1 and 2, that's already been settled.
Okay.
So you get the 20 years, you automatically get the two 5-year extensions. The only question would be what the decommissioning cost would be, reevaluating that in 20 years before you get the two 5-year extensions.
So again,
And then the
just
bond
to get
number
back.
would go up.
So let me just clarify, so, I just heard, Councilman Hubbard say that he would be amenable to that, the extensions, the 5-year extensions. Does that change your duration of the special permit?
No, it's 20
Okay,
years
that's gonna
with
stay.
the
Okay.
option to go 5 and 5, but the option, we have to revisit the decommissioning price
Okay.
after
But
20 years or at 20
Those
years.
those are two different questions technically. One
They
is
Right.
the question as to whether this resolution, because I did have a chance to look up what we did with S-Power for the 20 megawatt. I did look at the public hearing, which was in November of 2016, and saw no discussion in there about the term, nor any discussion about the PPA. It was not brought up, at least at that public hearing. Following year, 2017, is when the resolution was adopted. That was done in November, and it clearly specified the term of the special permit. It called it out as a 20-year approval. So I think, again, following that process and sort of the template that was done there, the first thing I want to make sure we're clear on, both Greg and I, is that this approval resolution is going to provide for a 30-year term, with the caveat or condition being that at 20 years, again, this is going to trigger once the CO is issued. The clock starts running at time of CO. At 20 years, the applicant in town will be revisiting the issue of the decommissioning amount.
Yes.
Okay.
Whether it be Nextera or another solar company that's taking it over, and if it's not, then they'll probably decommission after 20 years anyway.
Right, right. So I think all the covenants that we draft always indicate they're binding on successors and assigns. They run with the land and stuff like that to cover the concerns that the board has brought forth. This is something that we obviously will discuss with applicant's counsel unless he wants to indicate his thoughts at this point.
So I'm gonna stick with the 20 years to look at everything for lots of reasons. One, we can't know what the technology will be at that time. You know, we won't know necessarily, decommissioning might have even changed, and we don't even know who will own the company at that point. So I think I'm gonna stick with just looking at it all again in 20 years.
Again, as I've pointed out to the board in the past, who owns property is really not a relevant question. I know we keep talking about it in this context, we keep bringing it up, but again, I have to reemphasize that when we talk about zoning, it is the use, not the user, that's a relevant inquiry. So whether it's ABC Corporation or Acme or Wile E. Coyote Corporation. It does not matter who the entity is. Again, it's the question of the use, not the user. And we keep going down that rabbit hole. It's inappropriate.
Well,
Um,
pull that out of
Okay,
it, 30 years
but
for me
again,
is
the
a
other,
long
the other
time.
parts are, I think, you know, are questions that we don't impose upon other special permit applicants. I understand this use is a little bit different, but I just want to just caution you on the entity, because again, that's not really a relevant inquiry, and it's not one we should be going down. So, with that said,
I just want the decommissioning reevaluated after 20 years, the cost
I-
of the decommissioning,
got
that's
it,
it.
got it.
I'm in favor, and, let's just give the applicant one more time to
Yeah,
add any notes before we move
Yeah.
on, we move forward.
Madam Supervisor, I'm amenable to that. I think that's very easily addressed, as Mr. Kazakevich just said, in the language now that will be able to conclude a special permit resolution with these three matters now, these three remaining issues now addressed satisfactorily. And with respect to item 3, the decommissioning, I understand Mr. Bergman's point, and Mr. Kazakevich's point, as well as the point of the board with respect to the salvage value. I think that can be very easily accommodated, and with respect to the 20-year revisiting, I think that could potentially even be in all parties' interest, in the sense that both parties, the town and the applicant, collectively, in 20 years, will know much more about what decommissioning would be and what values would be associated with that, much more so than they would right now. So I think conceptually that's fine, and I again reiterate that I think the language to accomplish that is relatively straightforward and would not require much to do. I think that's a simple addition to what we're doing.
Great.
And to add to that, you know, not only can it be added to the resolution, but can be added to any covenants and restrictions that get ultimately negotiated with the applicant and approved for filing and in fact recorded.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to add into the special permit was that permits would be required for changing out any of the panels, so that if they were to change out a larger panel to a smaller panel, and the smaller panel were to generate more megawatts per hour, that the pilot payment might have to be adjusted.
I think our pilot agreements include that language in them already, I believe. I'll have to take a look at it.
yes.
Okay,
I believe they already provide for that contingency.
Okay, but I think it should be a part of the special permit approval also. That it's in the pilot agreement that any changing out of the panels would require a building permit.
All right, that'd be something we can inquire, but as I say, I know that it's in the pilot agreement.
Okay.
I do believe we did bring that up early on in the process. I think the applicant had made something, you know, because I brought that up, what if technology changes? And did it include maintenance of panels if they were just going in and replacing damaged panels, or, I mean, how do we, you know?
It's not maintenance, I mean, it's changing out the panels, so, I mean, they're not gonna change them all out at once. If they're changing out one, and, you know, obviously, I think it's in our agreements too, that we have the right to go and inspect at any time, so, you know, our building department, I'm sure will stay on top of that, to make sure that the panels are consistent with what's originally installed, and that if there are any changes, that building permits are taken out.
I mean, I don't, anyone in our building department, I mean, myself included, Jeff, I mean, if we go out there and I see a 5 megawatt panel versus an 8 megawatt panel,
Got it.
we're not gonna know the difference, but I do know that it would impact, if they're increasing their megawatt production, that would impact their PPA with LIPA. I don't know how they're entertaining that fact, but, I mean, if it's if the board
just
feels it's
give a-
required, we could put
Okay.
that in.
I think the only thing, if I may, the only thing I think we have to be careful of with that is, look, panels, as we know, could potentially be damaged from time to time. And if we're talking about just replacement to maintain the efficiency and the working operation of the project, that's not gonna be subject to a building permit in that sense, or what you're contemplating. However, I do agree with the notion that if you're going to be swapping out technology, of course, the town's gonna be apprised of that.
Yeah,
But I just think we have to distinguish between the two.
because we ran into that problem with our, water towers, with changing out the technology, and them not coming in for permits, and us not being aware of the weight and everything else that was impacting the water towers. So it's just something that kinda haunts the board a little bit about that, in that they were changing out the technology and the town did not know about it, and they were adding more weight to our towers. So I just don't wanna see the same thing happen, you know, as far as the solar panels.
Okay.
Just as a point, I did pull up the special permit for S-Power, and it did include as a condition, that prior to site plan approval, town and the applicant shall enter into a payment in lieu of a taxes agreement to the satisfaction of the town of Riverhead.
Okay.
And so just pointed out, that was part and parcel of that special, that grant of special permit in that case.
So that if the pilot agreement does speak to that, that would in effect be captured by stating the pilot agreement shall be entered into, correct?
Correct.
All right.
I don't think it hurts to be redundant, rather than having to dig out the pilot agreement and see if it's in there that it says that they have to take out a building permit if they're changing out the technology. I just think it could be redundant and put into the special permit.
I would offer, I think, just to have some clear, simple language, if the megawatt production of the facility at any point exceeds the 22.9, which is currently proposed, the applicant shall come in and reevaluate a pilot agreement. That way,
That's
you know, because
Perfect.
if they
Perfect.
reduce the footprint and it's still putting out 22.9 megawatts, I mean, what's
Right.
the harm in that? So
I
I'll
agree.
I'll include some language in there that if the production of the facility exceeds 22.9 megawatts, the applicant shall be required to revisit pilot agreements and
Notify the town.
I'll
if there's
I'll
another
speak with Bob on that and I'll kind of
Yeah,
button that up, but we'll put something in there just clean and simple like that.
Very good.
And you'll forward that to us ahead of time so we can take a look at it, that right?
I was gonna maybe just bring it up off the floor at work. No, yes, you'll
Like you do.
any resolution the board will have reviewed would probably
No.
be discussed at work session.
Yes,
Thank you,
and
Greg.
it's good. And right, Catherine, that it gets, sent out to everyone beforehand. All right, so, that's it. Thank you, Counselor, and we're gonna move on to, we had this discussion, and I know Catherine Ken brought it up last, Tuesday about PFAS
Yes.
in the meeting, and,
Thank you
something that.
thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you.
So next up is Frank Mancini, in charge of our water department. As you know, quite a few months ago, we created funding for H2M to conduct map and plan to connect the Manorville water residents who may be experiencing PFAS in their pipes. And that plan, Jody, I think is just about drafted, if I understand?
Yeah, no, it's done.
It's
The
done.
plan's done, it's been given to the water district superintendent, and I believe to the community development agency,
Okay,
and they are reviewing it so that we do have a map and plan if the
In place.
wells should come back contaminated, but the Navy is not testing drinking water wells, they're testing groundwater and from their monitoring wells, and I don't believe that all those test results are back yet. So in speaking with the water district superintendent, it was his recommendation to wait until all of the results are in, and then FOIL that information from the Navy as to what the results were for all of the wells, because one of them, they indicated, did come back at extremely high levels.
right, and that's important, and the reason that the map and plan was completed was if there comes a point that we need to do a water hookup, that it's done. The basis, the foundation has been completed, and we know where we have to go very quickly. And, so would you just add to it? And I know that Captain Ken, had some, thoughts on it? Good
Okay.
morning.
Again, thanks for having me. I'm
Sure.
the Riverhead Water District Superintendent Frank Mancini. So this started because the Navy's RAB meeting occurred, which was attended by Councilperson Kenton Giglio, myself, Stan Carey, the Chairman of the Planning Board, and a number of other people. That happens every 6 months where they update us, the Navy and their consultant, on what they're doing. One of the other attendants was Andy Rapenko from Suffolk County Department of Health, and he was asked about the people of Manorville and the sampling there. So there's two separate issues going on. The one is Suffolk County Department of Health is collecting drinking water samples from private wells for the homes south and southeast of Manorville, and having the Suffolk County Water Authority lab analyze them. Suffolk County Department of Health is paying for this, and that will drive who gets hooked up to public water, and my recommendation there is we wait till that sampling is done, and we FOIL request Suffolk County Department of Health for those results, and our map and plan covers the entire area, and if there's indications that they should all be hooked up to public water, the plan is good to go as it is. If portions of the area should be hooked up to public water, then we can amend the plan quickly to accommodate those homes that need to be hooked up. I believe he said of the dozens of homes that have been sampled so far, 2 have had detections above the drinking water standard, 1 above, just above the 10, and 1 above the previous federal standard of 70. So my recommendation is we sit tight, wait till that data comes in, get a look at it through a FOIL request, which generally I'll do, and then we take action after that. Now, the RAB meeting is what the original question was about. That's slightly different. In that case, the Navy's consultant is sampling, monitoring wells throughout the EPCAL facility, the Navy facility, and there were some questions there where I think perhaps the town may want to get a little bit more involved. I don't know if you want me to get involved. I'm not really familiar with the structure of that, but I would be willing to if you want me to. I think the conflict there is that the Navy has taken the position that they will not take any action unless a sample is above 40 parts per trillion, where the New York standard is now 10. So there's a conflict there. And I thought about this since we brought it up the other day. I had a couple of days to think about it. So I think this is more of a policy problem at the moment, and we need to pressure our federal politicians to get the Navy to abide by the state of New York's new drinking water standards, but also the state of New York created these drinking water standards, and it's our responsibility to follow them, but not necessarily, it's not our responsibility to enforce them. So we should be pressuring the state of New York to pressure the Navy and say, well, this is our rule, you need to follow it. So that's where that confusion occurred, and that's something that has to be addressed and corrected.
Frank, was that addressed in the Senator Schumer's letter to,
No.
I don't know that
I
don't know that anybody,
it wasn't?
because nobody knew that the action level, they were gonna hold to the action level of 40. I think the RAB meetings, I've participated in 3. It seems like every time they have them, they collect the data, they don't have the analysis back. So it's like a dog and pony show. We're not really getting the information that we need to sort of judge the problem and are they making progress. And I think there can be some improvement, perhaps if we communicate them and say, listen, you have these things every 6 months. I collect these samples for our supply wells routinely, and it takes a couple weeks to get your analysis back. I don't think it's coincidence that they're having these meetings and they don't have the data back yet.
And Frank, I totally agree, because I have attended the first 2 meetings. I had
Yes.
a family emergency, I couldn't attend
Yeah.
the last one, but I was briefed by 2 different individuals. And I knew going in that all they were gonna talk about, they went into great detail of where they're gonna test, and where the water's flowing, and how many sites they tested. And maybe the next meeting should be after the results are in.
That's what I'm
You know,
saying.
because it's
Yeah.
almost like, you're right, a dog and pony show. Here we go. This is
Yeah.
all we did. And I remember the second to the last meeting, they said, oh, we're gonna start testing in April. And this is where we're gonna go and what we're gonna do. And then COVID hit and that got put off. And so you're right. And a lot of effort goes into these meetings. And I know that, Congressman Selden has been an active supporter of this.
Yes, they were on the call also.
They always are
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, I did wanna say that Mark Willie was on the call actually
Yep, he
for, Zeldin, and he did respond that, you know, they were willing to do whatever they could. And just to the Chuck Schumer letter, what Chuck Schumer is demanding that the Navy address this issue, and that he's asking that the Navy act quickly in light of the New York State drinking water standards, so he has been present
Okay,
for
so he
that.
brought that up.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I mean,
Like I said, that's more of a policy change out of federal, a federal level.
Right.
I think people are getting angry and yelling at their consulting engineer, which doesn't really help the problem, because they're getting paid by the Navy and the federal government. We need to address the people who pay them and tell them what to do. The people.
nobody was really getting too angry.
No, but the first
Adrian
one.
always talks excitedly.
Yes,
He
yes.
always talks that way.
But the first one, when Yvette came, they were livid. When
Oh,
we did it
yeah.
in person, that was intense.
Boxing gloves.
Yeah. But, I don't wanna defend the consulting engineers, but they're getting paid by them, and they have to listen to the people who pay them, so I think we need to go after the people who pay them,
Sure.
not necessarily the people sitting there doing the presentation.
Right, and that was something that was discussed also, and I'm glad Stan brought it up, and telling the Navy that they need to be in accordance with New York State drinking water standards, and that they need to be focusing on that, so, I've been sitting in these RAB meetings for 11 years, and with all the money
Lucky
and all the
you.
time that the Navy has spent on studying and monitoring wells and pumping and all of everything that they're doing, they have to have spent at least $50 million over the last 20 years since they gave the property to the town of Riverhead. And for $3 million cost to extend public water to these people, if there's any indication of any signs of PFAS and PFOS in their drinking water wells, then it needs to happen. And that's what I emphasized as I was getting off the call. But we do have the cost analysis now from H2M, and we're ready to go if any of those wells come back. And keeping in mind too, that the plume is constantly moving. So even at the drinking water wells that don't have any signs of it right now, that's not to say that they won't have signs of it in 10 years. And are we gonna keep studying and spending all this money rather than just extending public water?
Well, I mean, and back to Schumer, what Schumer said was he was urging the Navy to immediately develop a plan to connect homes near the former Grumman site in Calverton to public water. So my concern, to the point that you're bringing up, is that, you know, you were saying it's not a problem that they are testing at different levels, the problem is with the mitigation. So if they're setting these standards, are they setting these standards in a way that they won't be responsible for the mitigation?
No, well, that's where I think the town has to take an active role in that.
Right.
Well, remember, there was some confusion about the testing. There's a detection limit in which how small can you see a number? And there was the 40 has relevance because when we initially looked for PFAS in some of the early UCMR sampling, which is how we look for early detection, the detection limits back then were 20 and 40 for the two PFAS compounds. Now, here we are 5 years later, we can look at it at a 1 to 2 part per trillion level, so we're seeing more of it. It was there before, but we didn't have the ability to see it. So that's what's important, is they're testing at the right level, we'll have the right data. But it's the action we take based on that data that we have to change. They should be responsible for not only hooking up people who are impacted by that contamination, but also remediating groundwater that is contaminated above the drinking water standard. And an example of that would be when the sewer plant was dewatering that area to install its new sewer pipes. When you pump any water out of the ground, you cannot discharge it back into the ground until it meets drinking water standards. So they had to get additional funds to now treat that water for the dewatering project to put it back in the ground. Now, that should be paid for by the person whoever put it in the ground, and in that case, it's likely to have been the Navy because it's on their property.
And
Well,
that's what
Frank,
our
they
lawyers
also,
are working on.
other people were also bringing up the point that the Navy kept saying, well, we're only testing groundwater. But our groundwater and our drinking water, can you just
Yeah,
address
so
that
this is
issue
a
that
bone
came
of
up?
contention for when people like me get frustrated when we mix groundwater and drinking water, because it does a disservice to the complexity of hydrogeology. All groundwater has the potential to be drinking water, but not all, but drinking water is very specific. We target areas that don't have contamination. But what I thought was interesting is they essentially took the position, and it wasn't clear to me if that guy Dave was for the DEC or
Yes.
His name
was John.
Or John, because it's hard to pay attention now with these
He
virtual
said he was
things.
from the state.
So they were basically like, we're only looking at groundwater that has the potential to impact drinking water wells now or in the future. So that means if there's, and I was a little set back by that, because it means if there's contamination in the ground and the modeling shows it's moving in this direction and there is no drinking water, private wells, we happen to have no public wells in that area, but that they would take no action. And I thought, well, that's a little interesting, because if you as a homeowner wanted to do something on your house and you pumped out water in the ground and you were found to have contaminated the ground above drinking water standards, the DEC would be looking at you to clean that up, whether it had the potential to impact a public drinking water well or a private well or not. So I thought that was an interesting position that I didn't necessarily think was appropriate.
Right.
And I'm in agreement, but I mean, I just I feel like we need, as, to your point, we need to, you know, the Navy needs to step up and take care of this, and I'm just concerned about how the testing comes out as far as mitigation, because I wanna make
Yeah.
sure that they are responsible. I mean, these are contaminants that were from the Navy, the firefighting foam and all these other.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
has
we
to,
hired the lawyers.
This is why we did the map and plan,
And we hired lawyers.
and we hired lawyers, okay,
Yeah.
and we can't predict what the Navy's gonna do, but what we need to do before we start dragging this whole conversation is get the numbers, and then we know that we could go with
That's right.
action.
And
And instead
Having
of trying to-
conversations is not dragging it out, I'm asking Frank,
we're
we're
not-
bringing up things that the public needs to know.
Okay, it's
My
correct, the
point
public needs
is-
to know, but we need facts. You can't go into court and we have to go after the Navy. We need the numbers, we need facts to approach this.
And thank you to Legislator Krupski
Yes.
and the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, who actually took it upon themselves at a very
Mm-hmm.
costly expense to go out and test all the wells. And I think that they were testing something like 80 wells out there.
yeah, I think even a couple more, it's a fairly large area they're looking at, and they
Yeah.
had looked at roughly 1/3 of the wells already,
Mhm.
at the low detection limit, so this is not a completely blind area as
Sure.
far as looking at it.
Yeah,
But,
so
the
thank
more
you
deep-
Legislator Krupski.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the more you look, the better story you can tell.
Yeah.
But there's some, the town of Riverhead owns this parcel. If the Navy is contaminated,
Mm-hmm.
we should be involved in that and be looking for them to clean it up, because it could inhibit your plans in the future.
Frank,
Yeah.
you say we should be looking,
Yeah.
we will be looking.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's make that night,
And that's
Yeah.
why we hired the law
Yeah.
firm.
exactly,
Yeah.
that's why we
Push us forward, yeah.
we have everything in check. We have the law firm and we're doing, the planning, the mapping, and that's to be ready. So we're putting all our ducks in order, and as soon
Yeah.
as they give us the results, and we're gonna have a lot of support, whether Schumer, we'll have Zeldin, we'll have Krupski, we'll have this town board, and we're gonna move forward. So it's not, we should consider,
Yeah.
yeah, we are gonna do it.
All right, excellent, and
This
like
will
you
come
said
to a
before,
conclusion.
the driving factor will be the results. It's an
That- that's
emotional
the
issue,
only-
people get emotional about it, but we need to look at that data, and the data will drive the action that occurs afterwards.
Yes.
Exactly.
And people do get emotional about
Yeah.
it.
If
But
we have
Frank,
to-
I just wanna say thank you so much for all of your great work that you do, and, clearly you're really on top of everything, and
Thanks.
trying to give us all sides of an issue, so I appreciate that.
And Frank, can you make sure that the entire board has a copy of that? Jody, we didn't get it, I know I was supposed
Okay.
to get it,
Yeah.
the report,
And thanks to Kelly McClinchy for driving the train for the Manorville residents and
Yeah.
really holding the Navy's feet to the fire. So
Yes.
she's really been a strong advocate, and, you know, when her well was tested on October 8th and she still doesn't have the results back, it leads questions as to why she doesn't have the results back yet.
Right.
Yeah, I don't understand that either, it takes a couple of weeks for the turnaround.
We're gonna get them.
If we have to play to the tune of 10 parts per trillion, then the Navy has to play to that
Exactly.
tune also. And we have to do whatever we can do as a town to
Correct.
support that, push it forward, take legal action. And as Catherine and Jody have mentioned, with the help of county legislators, Krupski, and with
Senator Schumer?
Senator Schumer for
Yep.
sure, and Congressman Zeldin, we have to do what, the squeaky wheel gets the
That's
get
right.
grease, right? And the bigger we
correct.
can make ourselves, because we're the little people in this, the bigger we can make ourselves by joining tasks with these other agencies, the better off we're gonna be to force the Navy to play fairly. Because
And
they're
I-
not playing fairly right
I
now, at
agree with
all.
every
Okay.
point you made.
Great, thank
Great
you,
points.
thank
Okay,
you, Frank.
thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Yes, and.
Thank you again, Frank.
Thank you, everyone. This wraps up our discussion items. In a moment, I'll ask you for a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the following contractual matters surrounding loan AHC 9F26 and the town of Riverhead, and that would be with, Thomas and McCormick. Are they here?
And while we're waiting, I have an announcement I wanted to make. Since we were talking about the solar, and we were talking about the state, I saw on the state website something very important that's coming up on December 1st. There's going to be a public hearing about the Riverhead Solar 2 project. It's a Zoom meeting. It's actually the same time, day that we have a town board meeting, but the first Zoom is at 1 o'clock, and then it's again at 6, so hoping to talk with our planning department and the other the rest of the people on the board, and see if, we're able to you know, it's important that someone be there from Riverhead, and, I'd like to know I've asked to put it on for a work session so we can talk about what's going to be said.
Okay, yeah, and in the future, if you have an announcement, share it with us, it's nice to know that,
That's why
you
I'm
know, you
doing
can
it
make
now.
the announcement, but.
And I'm also asking if
Yeah.
we could, Deb and I, asking if we could put that information about that Zoom meeting on the town website.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
we'll definitely, we'll work on that, no problem. Can I get a first and a second to, enter into executive session, please?
Motion.
Second, third.
Aye.
All in favor? All opposed? So moved. Everyone have a good one. I have a 12 Zoom.